Thank you, Carson. Thank you all for joining us today. We have a lot of information to go through, so I'm just going to jump right in. So we're going to go through some ways of saving water and energy. We're going to talk about some of the ways to assess water use within your facility, meter and track your water use, and then we're going to go through some best management practices to save water throughout your facility. Then at the end, we'll go through some of the WaterSense tools and resources that are available, as well as some special things that have been created to respond to COVID issues that happen during reopening of buildings. And then at the end, we'll go through some of the questions that you guys answer or ask us in the chat box, so keep them coming. So why should you become water efficient? We like to kind of give some context at the beginning of each one of these webinars to talk about why it's important to save water. One of the biggest ones is to save on your operational costs and prepare for emergencies. A lot of the places in the country are actually increasing the rates of water rates and sewer rates within their municipalities. So they are increasing significantly in many areas, so you really want to make sure that you can manage some of those costs in the future, and that'll help you to kind of plan your budget a little bit easier. It's also helpful because if you save money on your utility bills, you can use those funds somewhere else within your facility that goes towards your mission rather than just paying for building maintenance and utilities. It also can help if you're managing your water to minimize the impact of any water restrictions that happen during droughts or other shortages. This is a very important thing, to just have a plan for what you would do during an emergency. And then also on the business side, it can help you gain a competitive advantage in the marketplace. We're finding that tenants will often pay more for green property, and water efficiency is one of those aspects. You can also use water efficiency to meet the credits for building certification, such as LEED. So it's a good place to take a look at and get those extra points. We also wanted to highlight the energy-water nexus, and basically this is that water and energy are interrelated. Every gallon of water has an energy footprint that's needed to pump, move, heat, and treat the water, both in the distribution system for your utility and within your own building. Because of this, you can actually save water and energy at the same time, and vice versa. Believe it or not, 8% of commercial buildings' energy use is used to heat water. And this is really about the same amount of energy as used for cooling and ventilation or HVAC systems. So it is a pretty significant amount of energy. It actually can save you enough to be part of your energy efficiency portfolio in general. So we're starting to see more companies that are including water projects in their energy portfolios. And then because of this, you'll get the biggest bang for your buck when you're evaluating water and energy efficiency together, because it gets you the biggest cost savings and resource savings at the same time. So for those of you that aren't familiar, I wanted to give a quick intro to the WaterSense program, because WaterSense can help you kind of address some of these issues and get you started. WaterSense is a voluntary program that was created by EPA in 2006. We are the sister program to Energy Star, and we work to provide simple ways for all sorts of people, consumers and businesses, to identify water-efficient products, programs, practices, and homes. So the WaterSense label is on the right-hand side of your screen, and you'll see this on products that are independently certified for water efficiency and performance. In the beginning of low-flow fixtures back in the 90s, a lot of them saved water, but they didn't work very well. So all of our specifications include performance metrics to make sure that every one of them works just as well or better than their standard counterparts. So when you look for this label, you know that you'll actually save water, and in many cases save energy as well. So the title of today's presentation is really Just Add Water. And honestly, it can just be that simple. In many ways, you guys are already managing your energy efficiency and a lot of other systems within your building. So adding water into that may not be as big of a lift as if you were doing it by yourself. So really it can be as simple as adding "and water" after every time that you talk about energy. So one of the ways to do that is to kind of incorporate some water best practices into some of your standard operation and maintenance procedures and add it into your procurement policy so that when you're actually buying new products or fixtures, you can look for these labels, the WaterSense label, and know that you're going to save water, or other areas where you may just want to save water in general. So some of these changes to SOPs can be done at the very low or no cost, so it can be a really good way to get started. You can also add water efficiency requirements into your procurement so that when you buy them, any products, just like you do with Energy Star, you can have that built in. And also, we're going to talk about today how continuous monitoring and tracking of your water use can help you identify problems quickly instead of waiting for a giant bill to show up. The other thing that you can do is to include some of the best practices that we talk about in employee training and use some signs in your facilities to kind of remind people where they should be looking for and how to report problems. So one of the reasons why we talk about this is that the cost of water is deceptively low. It seems lower compared to energy, but it's actually significant in itself. One of the things about water is that facilities pay for water twice. So the costs really add up fast if you're wasting water. Basically, in the way that the systems are set up here in the United States, you pay for the water coming into your building, and then you pay for the water being discharged from your building to the sewer. So usually it's broken up into two separate sections within your water bills, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. And when you look at this, it doesn't include the cost of energy that's needed to pump it and heat the water through your building. It doesn't also include other associated costs like increased chemical costs or detergents, also increasing your equipment maintenance that may happen with higher usage or may be required. And then you have a lot of increased energy costs for heating this water and moving the extra water around your building. So when you're looking at projects to see if they're going to get you a payback that you need to get, you really need to make sure that you're including the true cost of water, which is the combination of all of these things. It's not just the water rate by itself. The other thing that's important about water is that you have to verify it all the time, unfortunately, because each end use may change, the performance of each fixture may change over time. Unfortunately, plumbing products, when they fail, they're often open. The circuit is open, so they leak. Unlike an energy product where if the circuit is broken or there's a malfunction, it just doesn't work. So unfortunately, this means that because of some of these physical components of these fixtures, you have to keep checking them and verifying that they work. A lot of the valves and flappers and gaskets will break down over time, so they need to be monitored and fixed. Also, broken parts don't always stop the water from flowing, but they can reduce efficiency or cause leaks and property damage. So those are some things that you may not notice if you're not looking at the performance of your piece of equipment or your fixture. It may just seem like it's fine when it's actually wasting a lot of water. And because you're paying for this water twice, this leaking or continuously running water really has no value that it's adding to your business. So it's really not worth doing, basically. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to get a handle on how to manage the water within your facility. So to start off, we put together some profiles of common commercial buildings so that you could see kind of a breakdown of how much water is used in different areas. Every facility is different. It has different infrastructure. It has the age of the building may be different. You really have to do a water assessment of your own facility to figure out where you might be wasting water. But some of the big categories that you can see here kind of across the board are restroom water use or sanitary systems, as we call them. And that's usually a restroom facility. And that's usually about 30% of the water use. And then depending on where you are in the country, you always have heating and cooling costs. So that's the section in red. And that obviously varies over time or by the place that you're living in. So that's one of the big ones. It can be about 30 to 40% of your water use. And then depending on how large your outdoor area is, you may be using a significant amount of water outdoors as well. So you really want to get a handle on what it looks like for your facility, but those are some good places to get started. So today we're going to dive into some areas of water assessment and just very briefly touch on others. We put together some of these slides to combine water efficiency and water quality because of some of the issues that may come up when you are reopening a building after it has been unoccupied for a while. So I'm not going to get into the details of all of this, but I wanted to put it there so that you could think about it as you're planning and managing the building as you go. So there are quite a few aspects of this, but I wanted to kind of say that a really comprehensive plan should have all the different parts of your facility's water use included. So it would be water quantity and quality. You want to look at your water risk and the safety of the building occupants. I put a resource here for a toolkit that the CDC created, which is actually really helpful. It talks about planning your water use and your management of your water system. So if you guys are interested in learning more, you can take a look at that. It's a really great resource. And then also, you obviously want to look at your stormwater management and plan for emergencies as well. So we're not going to get into those two things at all today, but I just wanted to put them here for your knowledge or get the thought across. So each one of these really has to be facility specific and take into account all the different pieces of equipment and systems that you have within your facility. So you really do need to kind of go around and look and kind of get a handle on where water is being used and if there are things that might cause water quality problems within your building system. So that was just kind of an overview, but I wanted to kind of give you a visual that combines some of the water efficiency ways to assess your water system and some of the things that you can think about in terms of water quality. So the biggest steps are usually the same, that you need to assemble your team within your facility that should include people from all different parts of your facility so that you can kind of get a handle on the overall use of water within your facility. Then you need to take a look at your system and describe it with some text and flow diagrams, and this can kind of help you see where there may be issues within your system. Then we also need to establish a water use baseline. That's something we're going to talk about today. And then usually we tell people to identify areas where water is being used, but it's also an opportunity to look to see where pathogens could grow and spread within your building system. So that's kind of a combination of water quality and quantity. And then once you've kind of identified where there may be issues or places where water is being used, you can take a look and see what kind of efficiency projects or control measures that you need to put in place. And then, of course, with any plan, you have to monitor and check out the performance of your system and your plan. And you can do that as well with your water fixtures to check to make sure that they're working properly. And then if you aren't meeting the goals that you expect, then you have to kind of adjust and kind of evaluate things. So as you're doing this, it really is important to document everything because it can be a lot of information. So it can be helpful to make sure that you've got everything in one place. So what we're going to talk about today mostly is some of the steps for assessing water use, and I kind of threw in some of the things for water quality as well where it made sense. So we really need to get started on getting a handle of your water use by gathering the information on your water sources and kind of collecting your bills, your water bills, and seeing what they have. And then also, as we mentioned, we want to establish a baseline from the water use data from a typical year. And then you want to identify all the fixtures and equipment in your system. You kind of have to do an inventory. And then you also want to take a look and find out where pathogens can grow and spread. Then you want to verify the performance of your existing fixtures and then choose specific projects and control measures that can help you improve your system. So the first part is to gather information on your water use. You really need to identify the water sources that you have for your facility and how each one of them is measured. In many cases, buildings just have one water source where they get water directly from their utility. That's municipal supplied potable water. And others actually get the water from other places. It may be reclaimed water from the utility, maybe from a surface water or groundwater source. And then also some places you have some alternative sources where you're collecting rainwater, getting some condensate from your air cooling system that can be used for other purposes, and the same with gray water. So you want to kind of do an assessment to figure out how many water sources you have and how are they actually measured. Are they metered? Are they unmetered? Do they have a sub-meter on them? Those are some of the things to get a handle on. So once you kind of know what sources you have, you can start to collect the data to establish this baseline. You want to take a look at about 2 years of water and sewer data, and then pick a year if you have it where there aren't any significant disruptions or strange things that happen. So for example, this year might not be a great year to choose as a baseline because buildings may have been closed. So you want to kind of pick a normal year if you can figure that out. And then if you don't have meters on all the sources, you can estimate how much water is being used by looking at the pump rates basically, or you can look at the size of the storage tank and kind of estimate it from there. So once you kind of have that estimate, you can look at all of it together and figure out what your water use looks like on a regular basis. And this can help you in the future as you try to compare things that you do to improve this water use and reduce it if you can. So as I mentioned, you really want to take a look at your water bills because there can be some issues on them and you want to get them corrected if they are accurate. So you need to verify, first of all, that your facility is in the correct rate class and that you're being charged for the correct size water meter. You'd be surprised how many people look into this and find out that they've been charged for a meter that's much larger or much smaller than they expected. So you really want to take a look at that and make sure that it makes sense. And then also, if you find discrepancies in these bills or other problems, you want to work with your utility to correct them. One of the things you can do is to hire a bill review service, and they'll actually look through all your bills from the past couple of years and work with the utility directly to actually change them. So that can be worth it if you have a larger amount of data or large system. You also want to match your meters to the location where they are in the facility and the systems and equipment that that meter covers. So you kind of have a snapshot of what's involved in that meter. And then some utilities will give you credits if you can prove that you aren't discharging water to the sewer. So you may want to take a look at that and see if that's a possibility, because if water is evaporating, for example, with irrigation, you're not actually putting it down into the sewer. So they may be able to give you a reduction in your sewer charges because of that. And then also, if you are able to find a leak and report it to the utility, a lot of them will give you an adjustment or a partial credit for that water. So that can be really helpful as well. So I put together a sample water bill so that you could see what we're talking about. As you can see on the right, there are actually 4 different water rates here because in a lot of areas they have higher rates for the higher usage of water, so that you kind of have to pay more if you go over a certain amount. So you really need to take a look at that, and when you're trying to make calculations for your payback, you need to use the highest rate first until you've brought your usage down into the lower tiers. Not every utility has it structured this way, so you really need to look and see what's happening at your facility. Then the sewer rates are actually listed separately, so that needs to be added in along with the water rate to actually calculate your water costs. And then most bills will actually have some usage graph or a trend graph on them, as well as the total water usage that you've had for that period. In this case, you can see that there's 2 different meters, so you have to add the 2 together to get the full water use of your facility. So you really need to look at this and kind of see what makes sense for your facility, but it can be a little complicated. In many cases, your utility will have some sort of a resource or on their website to go through this for you, and you can also just call them and ask them as well. I'm sure they'd be happy to explain things. So as I mentioned, metering and sub-metering are really important because you don't want to wait for the bill to see a problem if you have a leak or another issue. So you really want to meter all the sources of water in your facility so that you can see if there are problems. In some facilities, they have one meter for an entire building or entire campus of buildings. So if that's the case with your facility, you need to make sure that you can go in and put in sub-meters at least with some of the other parts of your facility so that you can separate some of those buildings from each other. And then also you just want to make sure that you've metered all the sources somehow so that you can actually target your reductions. One thing that's really helpful about water here is that sub-meters in the water world don't need their own utility accounts. They can just be for internal use only. So it can be really helpful. You can actually get temporary flow meters or other monitoring devices, such as acoustic leak detection devices, and you can just set them up wherever you want in your facility. And that can be really helpful because you can kind of get a better handle on some of this stuff without having to add additional administrative costs from your utility. So the last thing that it can be helpful is some of them will allow you to set up alerts with the system, and it can actually email you or call you if there is a leak or a malfunction that it's detecting. So that could be a really helpful way to find out if water is being wasted in your facility. We try to give a couple of recommendations to give you a sense of what kinds of systems might need a sub-meter. Really what we talk about is any system that's expected to use more than 1,000 gallons per day or 100,000 gallons per year would be a good place to put a sub-meter. If you have tenant spaces, that could be a helpful way to break up the water costs. A lot of tenants are asking for more data and more information on their own operations. So that can be a really good way to provide that to your tenants. And then also if you have larger HVAC systems, any sort of an irrigation system, or if you have one of these alternative water systems, those are some good places to put them. And as I mentioned, they don't need their own utility accounts, so it's really whatever makes sense for you. Also, you can track all of these things in Portfolio Manager. There is a tab right next to the energy one where you can add water meters. You can also add sub-meters in here as well, but you need to just make sure that when you aggregate them all together that you're not double counting. So you can actually put all of this stuff in there together, and you can get trend data as well, so it can be really helpful. So we just had a quick poll that we wanted to send over to you guys. We just wanted to get a sense of how many of you are actually tracking water use in Portfolio Manager. So if you could take a minute to just put in put in your answers, we can see how you guys are doing so far. Okay. I think we can close that up and share the responses. It's interesting for me to know how many of you are already doing that. Okay, it looks like it's not working. So we can just go on to the next, oh, there we are. It looks like there's quite a few of you who don't know, or you think somebody else in your organization might be tracking it. Some of it is done automatically by the water utility, so there could be some of you that don't know that it's in there, but it could be there. So that's really helpful to know, and if you have questions about any of this and you need help putting the information into Portfolio Manager, you can contact some of the people at the end of the presentation and ask them for help. So I just wanted to go into how to take an inventory of all of your water using fixtures, because it can be kind of complicated. So this is another area where we've added some more information for water quality as well as quantity. So one of the ways to do it is to tour the facility where the water is being used and kind of interview personnel, take a look at what's going on, capture some detailed information about your equipment or your fixtures, and then use that information to kind of estimate your water use. Also, you want to check to see if there's any drain lines that are plumbed to floor drains, because sometimes there could be water that's flowing in some of those floor drains and you don't really know that something's connected to it. So it can be kind of surprising to see, so it's a good thing to check out. And then also you can use some of the plumbing diagrams and the system diagram, if you have them, to kind of look for some of the areas where you may have some water quality issues. And then, as I mentioned before, you want to verify water use whenever possible, because sometimes the flow rates are different if there's a malfunction. So you can do this manually, or you can use a temporary flow meter or other water monitoring device to do that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is the portion where I'm going to mention some of the water quality issues that may come up. Because of the way the water systems are set up within buildings, there can be places where water quality may be impaired because of the way that it's set up. So really the largest problem in most buildings is you want to avoid having an issue with Legionella, which is the pathogen that causes Legionnaire's disease. So that's kind of one that thrives in certain temperature ranges and when there is not enough disinfectant left in the water. So you really want to kind of take a look at where water may not be flowing continuously, such as a place where there's a dead end or water just isn't being used in that part of the facility. Also sections where the temperature may not be well controlled or where the heat may be transferred to it. So usually Legionella is within a certain range, temperature range, so you want to keep your water hotter than that or really cold, not so much in the middle where it's warm, because that's where the bacteria thrives. You want to take a look at where the water may not be flushed out very often, because the disinfection that your utility uses actually lowers over time. So that's a place where you may not actually have enough of the disinfectant left in the pipe to fight the pathogens. So that's a place where you might need to flush the system and put fresh water in to kind of boost those disinfectants higher. And then also, if you have equipment that's not used very often, like emergency showers, you need to flush those as well. And then areas where there are specific needs, like an ice machine or a cooling tower, there are more really detailed ways that you need to manage those. So it can be really important to take a look at this. And this is where that reference from the CDC comes in, as well as one from the EPA that we just put out because of COVID. So in some buildings, if the water's been sitting there and hasn't been flushed through the system or nobody's in there to use the water, there may be some issues with the water quality, and you need to make sure that you're checking that before occupants are exposed to any of that water. So you really want to look at all of this information and use your tools and work together. So that was the point of setting up a team with all sorts of people from different parts of your facility, because you may need the perspective of someone else to kind of get all of these things covered. You want to develop some really specific procedures and plans to address any deficiencies or vulnerabilities that you find. So that's where something like flushing the water system would be helpful, or testing the water to make sure that you have enough disinfectant in there still. So this is where you kind of need to combine some of your checklists or your other standard operating procedures so that everybody can look at things more holistically. And also there can be your vendors and your other contractors may be really helpful in this, because they can help you manage specific areas of the building, like your cooling tower. So really, what would be ideal is if you are, when you're going around to check the water use and see if there's issues with flow rates, and you're looking to make sure that the equipment's working well, you can also be looking at the water quality at the same time if you're looking at the disinfectant residual that's left, things like that, where you might want to sample the water in that area to see how it's faring. So this is one thing that there really isn't a great guidance document that includes all of these things. There's several separate ones, but if you kind of just look at the two, you can kind of mash them together basically and make up some kind of combination. So that's why we tried to put it all together for you today. And then after you've kind of figured some of that stuff out, you're going to need to make adjustments. And so this is where it's really helpful to document everything so that if you need to figure out what else to do, you can look back and see the steps that you've already taken that haven't worked in the past, for example. So these are some of the things that you can do as well. Some of the things that you can use to get started on the water efficiency side or the water use side is we have several checklists that are available. Some of them you can just print out and carry or walk around with in your facility and really just kind of see what's going on. You can also use some sample worksheets that we've put together, and that can help you kind of organize some of this information so that you have it all in one place in an easy format. So this is just a screenshot of our simple assessment checklist, and this is really just one of the things you can print out, and it brings you all around the facility and gives you some best practices that you can look for when you're there. And this can kind of guide you to some of the parts of our other documents that can help you fix the problems. So now that we've kind of talked through some of the assessment resources, I wanted to kind of give you guys some of the best practices that you can start using pretty quickly to start managing your water use and making sure that everything works properly. So one of the big things that we talk about in some of our other presentations is the amount of leaks and water waste that are happening within your system. And we're just going to touch on it briefly today, but really it's about 6% of your water use on average, which is pretty significant. So it is really helpful to take a look at this and try to reduce the waste as much as possible. So some of the indicators that there is a problem are things like spikes in your water usage, either found through your billing or through your actual reading of your meters and sub-meters. You can also find problems or malfunctions during a water assessment or an inventory of the equipment. You may just go around and see some property damage, like this hole in the ceiling, which is really not ideal. So if you can try to catch it before it gets to that point, it'll be much more helpful, obviously. You may also get alerts from your leak detection or your sub-meters. There's some that are set up just to tell you when there's a failure. So there's a lot of options out there that can help you right now. There are more types of equipment and different types of meters coming out all the time with some of the innovation that's happening. So you really just need to look and make sure that, you know, you can find something that works for you. There's a whole bunch of different options. So you need to kind of just see what matches with the amount of data that you're looking for and how much it costs. Those are really the two issues. You may also find problems when you're walking through the facility. And then we're going to talk a little bit about ways that you can help your employees or visitors or tenants tell you that there's a problem so that you can get the benefit because they're your eyes and ears on the ground. So just to kind of give you some perspective, I wanted to show you what the flow rate looks like and how much money that adds up to on average over the year. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can kind of see like a low flow coming out of a garden hose, and this is about what 1 gallon per minute looks like. And you may not think it's significant, but it can be almost $5,000 a year in extra water costs. So it can be significant even if it doesn't seem like it. And then on the other end, if you have a faucet or a hose that's on full flow, that's about 6 gallons per minute, and it's about $28,000 per year. So it can be pretty significant if that's flowing 24/7, and it can add up really significantly. These flows can be occurring within your mechanical rooms or other spaces where appliances or equipment require cooling. We did work with one facility that had a supplemental air conditioning unit that was using 7 gallons per minute, unknown to them. Once they found out that it was costing over $20,000 a year, they replaced it immediately. So any of this can be really significant. We put together just a quick chart to kind of give you some other ideas of what these things could cost, and basically the message is that they add up really fast and they can be avoided. So one of the ways to kind of prevent some of these things is to maintain some of these fixtures and pieces of equipment together so that you kind of make sure that you're on top of things. So one of the things, because of COVID, I'm going to mention is that building systems may need to be flushed after they've been closed for a while. And this applies sometimes even if you just have a reduced occupancy because the water isn't being used as much, so it doesn't flush as quickly. So you need to kind of take a look at that as you're reopening your facility and just make sure that you're on top of it. And then it also helps if you can kind of maintain your fixtures and equipment by looking at the efficiency and some of these infection control measures, because you can do it all at the same time, as I mentioned before. So when you look at your fixtures, like your faucets and toilets and shower heads, you want to check the flow rate as well as removing any scaling or visible biofilm. And that's kind of just good practice anyway. And then also you want to double check your flow rates in your cooling towers and pools and hot tubs by submetering the makeup and blow down water. And you can also at the same time check your levels of disinfectant and monitor your conductivity and other parameters for some of these systems. And in a lot of cases, you may work with a vendor, and if you can just talk to them and say that these, you're concerned about water quality and quantity, and that will, they can look at both of it and help you at the same time. And then you also want to minimize water efficiency or minimize water use in low traffic areas. So some of these systems, you may not be able to change things because of the needs of your occupants. But in other cases, some of these things are behind the scenes and your occupants may not even notice. So they may be some good places to start if you don't want to do anything too visible to the occupants or tenants. And obviously we want you to find any leaks or continuously running water because it's really not necessary. So one of the big ones is to save water in your restrooms. This is, as we mentioned before, 30 or 40% of your water use. And as I mentioned before, the older fixtures are really inefficient and are really just need to be replaced, basically. So if you have any fixtures that were installed before 1994, they use 3 to 5 times more water than today's models, and it does the same job. And because of the way that water use works in this area, at least, it really depends on user behavior, just like energy does. So you kind of need to continue to prompt people to do certain things, or kind of just give them some reminders. So it's a good practice to inspect your valves and your fixtures at least once a year and replace any worn parts. Some of these fixtures, like toilets and faucets, can sometimes leak. It's kind of just a problem with the technology that it doesn't seem to go away necessarily. So you want to make sure that you're kind of checking on these things and, just making sure that it's working as you expect. If you have any automatic sensors on faucets or on toilets, you want to make sure that you adjust them and calibrate them often, because they may be, flushing the toilet when no one's there, or a faucet may be running too long. You also want to make sure that you're removing any scale buildup and biofilm on the fixtures, especially on faucets and shower heads, to make sure that they're working as expected. Now you can do this electronically with some of these submeters, but you can also just do it yourself manually. So I wanted to give you just a quick guide to how to do that. Some of it is just a matter of just timing the flush of a toilet, or just dropping in some dye tablets with food coloring into the tank of the toilet. if it has one. And then you also just, may need a flow bag or just a Tupperware container or a bucket, and to just kind of measure how much water is coming out of the fixture over time. And that can help you see if your fixture is not working correctly. You also want to involve employees as much as you can, as well as tenants and other visitors, because you can't be everywhere. So it does really help to have some of the other users be involved in the process. You want to train your custodial staff to look for these leaks and other issues so they can tell you about it and fix them. You also may want to post some signage in your restrooms or your kitchen areas or pantries to just kind of call people's attention to the cost of leaks and give them the information to call if there's a problem. Sometimes people would be more than happy to report it, but they don't know how. So it can be really useful to use something like this. This is just one we pulled off the internet. We also have ones that are available that you can customize. There are some on the Energy Star website that was left over from one of the building competitions. And then WaterSense has just put out a couple of the others on the left-hand side of the screen for you all to use whenever you want. So those are available as well so that you don't have to come up with it yourself. So if you are looking at older fixtures or your fixtures just aren't really performing as well, you may want to take a look at some of the WaterSense fixtures that are available. We have them labeled in pretty much every plumbing product. We don't do public faucets just because the faucets are already, the code for them is already very low, so in their water usage. So it's a pretty good system already. So if you want, you can take a look at some of these fixtures, and any labels that you find on the products, you can be assured that they meet both water efficiency and performance metrics to get labeled. Another good target for some of your efforts is to look at the mechanical systems. I'm not going to get too far into the details of this just because it is very complicated, but I will say that it helps to have sub-meters and look for leaks, especially if you have a hot water system or a steam system, because they use so much energy. So they can be a big bang for your buck to look at this. And then also, if you have any single-pass cooling system, you want to really try to eliminate that whenever you can, because it is really wasteful. And then you want to maximize the number of times that your cooling tower cycles water throughout. So just a quick overview, the single-pass cooling basically just uses water once to cool the piece of equipment, and then it goes down the drain. And really that takes about 40 times more water than a cooling tower would to cool the same heat load. So it's incredibly inefficient. There are all types of equipment that can use this, so you may want to just take a look at them and see if there are air-cooled options or an option to recirculate the water to use it multiple times before you just charge it to the sewer. And then also with cooling towers, they can be up to 20 to 50% of your water use within a facility, and the water is pumped continuously. So it can be a huge amount of water and energy use. And this is an area where a lot of you may have vendors, so that would be a good time to check that out and ask them if they can help you. And then you want to make sure that you're kind of maximizing the number of times that the water is cycled through it to make sure that you are getting the most efficiency out of it as well. And then we also talk a lot about outdoor water use, and so I just wanted to bring our attention to the fact that a lot of the water used outdoors is wasted. A lot of it happens because there's poor irrigation system designed, or it's not being maintained properly, or the scheduling is not right. So we have a lot of resources on our website about this that you guys can check out. Some of the things we like to show some pictures sometimes is that there may be issues with the system, and some of them are really water intensive. So on the right side of the screen, this is what we call a geyser, where a sprinkler head broke and water's just pouring out of it, basically because there is no sprinkler head on it anymore. So if you do have an irrigation system outside, I would really encourage you to take a look at it, and possibly if you think it makes sense, you can actually get the system audited by an irrigation professional that's been certified by one of our label programs. So we have a little resource list of the people that have passed our tests, and you can look for them to help you with this as well. So I'm going to kind of skip over some of this stuff, but we have a bunch of resources that we have available on our website. We have all sorts of tools and tips and worksheets, and so I encourage you guys to take a look at some of that. We have some best practices. We have one guidebook that we made for all facilities, and then a set of shorter guidebooks for multifamily facilities specifically. So I encourage you guys to take a look at that and see what makes the most sense. You can really dig into any water-using fixture or piece of equipment in your facility with this information. And then if you're looking for water-efficient products, you can look for WaterSense label products. They're in all these different categories. And then we also work with Energy Star to include water factors into some of their water-using equipment, like dishwashers and clothes washers. So when you're looking for a new product, you can look for the WaterSense and Energy Star labels and know that you're getting an efficient product. I put up some of these COVID resources. Obviously, it's on everyone's mind right now because buildings may need to flush their water system. I wanted to make sure that you have the latest information. There are several CDC guides. I referenced one of the middle one, the Prevention Through Water Management, is that toolkit that helps create the water assessment graphics and the way that you can plan to manage the water within your systems. And then EPA that recently put out just a quick guidance on maintaining and restoring water quality in buildings after you've had low or no use. So I encourage you guys to take a look at that. And then also Energy Star is planning a specific webinar on this subject that should be scheduled for June 4th. The invitation should be coming out before the end of the week so that you, if you're interested, you can register for that and hear from some other EPA experts on water quality and in your facility. So I think that's pretty much it. We are going to be scheduling more webinars for our series, Water Wednesdays, throughout the year. So you may want to keep an eye out for some of those other upcoming webinars. In the meantime, if you want to dig in deeper to some of these topics, we have them available recorded on the Energy Star Training's website. So you can take a look at the ones that we did last year, and if you want to participate this year, the invitations should be coming out soon. Also, what you can do right now is you can take a look at some of our resources and start collecting the information you need to evaluate your water use and your water quality throughout your building. You may want to take a look at some of the systems you have and inventory your equipment and look at your water system to see if there are any areas where there may be a higher risk of water quality issues. So we encourage you guys to kind of look at this holistically. It is a process, but it is manageable. You just kind of got to break it down. So I'm going to leave this up for now, and if you guys have any questions, please continue to enter them into the chat box, and we will get to as many of them as we can before the end of the webinar. So if you have any further questions about Portfolio Manager or Energy Star, you can reach them at this address. And then also we have several ways to get in touch with WaterSense as well.